Alrighty, we're going to be building a user interface. Our user interface is going to start off by having a canvas with a button on it that will start our game. This is going to be called our main menu. Our main menu is going to be set up so that when we click on this button, it starts our game. Now, as of right now, my game is a rollerball game. So I have a simple rollerball game. The process that we're going to do to build these main menus is going to be the exact same in every game. And in addition, the first step you should take is you should open the instructions Google Doc that is attached on here, and you should make sure you're doing each of these steps. So let's look at the first step. Our first step is to create a new scene called main menu. So I'm going to go to my assets folder, and I'm going to go to my scenes folder, and I'm going to make sure to create a new scene, and I'm going to call it main menu. Now, I'm going to open up my main menu. Once I'm in my main menu, I can click 2D over here. And since I'm working on a UI, it's going to be a 2D thing I'm viewing, so I don't need to be in 3D. So let's start by adding a UI element, and we're going to add a panel, and we're going to call this panel main menu. And I can't really see this whole panel. I'm going to click on it and press F to see the whole thing. It doesn't look good. I'm going to click the 2D view. I'm going to view it in 2 dimensions. On this main menu, I'm going to right click. I'm going to create a UI element, and I'm going to create a button Text Mesh Pro. On your computer, you might have to install Text Mesh Pro or import it. A little rectangle will pop up and it will ask you to import Text Mesh Pro. Please do so now. Now, on my button, I have this text TMP element. I can use this to change the words that are written on the button. So maybe instead of button, maybe it could say start game. I can change some, color stuff over here. I can mess with different settings of the text. Here's the text color, vertex color. So I can change the color of the text. I can go to the button, and I can change the background colors of the button. I can go to my main menu, and I can change the background color of my main menu as well. I can also fill in, on this main menu, I could replace this source image with other images, such as from the internet, or I can add image elements. I can add an image element to my UI, so maybe this blue background has, an image of like hills in front of it or something. I'm not going to do that right now, but if you guys have some free time, you're more than welcome to customize your UIs. Right now, we have a start game button on the scene. It doesn't actually do anything yet. We have to head over to scripts. We're going to create a new folder in scripts called UI scripts. Everyone should have a scripts folder in their assets. And in this UI scripts folder, we're going to right click. We're going to create a new mono behavior script. We're going to call it start game. And this script is going to start the game when we click on this button. Now, I'm going to add code to the script. I'm clicking on the script, and it is freezing my computer. I'm going to add code to the script. Whoa, that's a lot of code that showed up. So what this code is doing, and here if you want to take a screenshot of it, or pause the video and get this code in, what this code is doing is it's importing a bunch of Unity libraries. We're going to need these to run these lines of code. The name of this code is load scene on click. In this instance, we're going to be doing the start scene, but you could load any scene that you have. It has a public string called scene name. I'll show us how to use that in a second. You could use it in here. We're not going to do that. You definitely could, though. It has a start function, so when our game starts, the button that this script is attached to is going to be found by the script. And then if that button exists, it's going to add a listener to that button. That listener is going to run the load scene function. So when we click on the button that this is attached to, it will run load scene. And load scene is going to take our scene to load, and it will load that scene. So let's look at how that looks in practice. Once we have that script saved, we can go to our button and drag that script in, and it has a scene to load right here. I'm going to go to my scenes, and my main scene is called mini game. So I'll go to my button, and I'll tell it that the scene that it should load in the load scene on click script, the scene to load is mini game. Now, when I press play, if I click on this button, it should load that scene correctly. Now, in a lot of your games, this will not work, and we're going to look at why that is very quickly. And we'll do this in class, and this is where I'm going to lose a lot of my students. And while I'm debugging this, you guys should be adding pictures, customizing this however you want. Now, sometimes we'll hit a problem where our scene is not in our build profile. You'll get an error in your console. It's a red error. I can actually show it to us. If I go to build profiles and I go to my scene list, I need to make sure that both of my scenes are in here. I can do that by opening up my other scene and clicking this add open scenes button. So for example, if I didn't have my minigame scene in here, if this was not checked, then when I play my game, since my minigame scene is not in my build profile, it will not be able to find that scene, and that scene will not load. So I believe that when I click start game, I get this error message. Minigame could not be loaded because it's not in the active build profile. When it is in the active build profile, I can click this, and it's not loaded because I need to reload my game. But now that it's loaded in the build profile, it should work. So make sure you have this checked in your build profile, which again is in the top left. File, build profiles in the top left. You need to make sure you have your scenes all checked in here. You can go around and open them manually. Just make sure to save this one before you do. Now when I click start game, it brings me to my game. This is a great first step. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some more of these panels and some more buttons to navigate between the panels. But first, since this is going to start getting a little complicated, we're going to create a new empty game object, and we're going to call it UI Manager. This UI Manager is going to manage our main menu, and I'm going to create a new script for that UI Manager, and I'm going to name it UI Manager. Now, this UI Manager is going to have, this is not my UI Manager. Now, this UI Manager is going to have 3 public references to 3 panels, just as an example. Actually, let's just start with 2. We're going to have a public. I'm just going to call it game object. Let's call it main menu. We'll have a public game object, and we'll call it, let's call it instructions. We'll all have an instructions page that we build together. And then you guys can make other pages as you want. So when the game starts, let's say, you know, main menu dot set active true. And we'll say instructions dot set active false. And then we'll add 2 functions. We'll say, you know, open instructions, the public void, open instructions. And what this is going to do is it will instructions.setActiveTrue. And we'll do public open main menu. And you might notice the font I'm doing, the way I'm handling, you know, these words is every time I start a new word, I just do a capital letter. And I start with the lowercase. That is a standard coding practice. Open main, and we'll just do main menu.setActiveTrue. Now, I'm going to add one more script to this because this is actually not going to work right now because my instructions and my main menu might both be open at the same time, which is going to cause an error. So I'm going to create a new public void, and this, actually I'm going to make this one private. No one needs to see this one. Private void, and I'm going to say turn everything off. And what this will do is this will just start by setting this main menu to false. It'll set instructions to false. And every time I want to turn something on, I'll turn everything else off. And then I'll turn the one thing that I want on. I'll turn that on. That's the code I'm going to use. There might be something slightly different in the classroom. And all you would have to do if I wanted to make a third page, maybe I make a story page. I just do, public game object. This will be a reference to my, my story, my background story of my game. And then I would just, create a new panel that says, actually, I would just set everything to off here. So when I start the game, let's just run, open main. So it should just open the main menu when we start the game. And then in turn everything off, I need to include this new one that I just made. I need to include story, .set active false, and I'll create a new function that opens up the story panel. Now I just wrote a lot of code, and it's hard to understand what it's doing. Public void, open story. It's hard to really see it without being in practice, but basically what will happen is it's going to story.second. Basically, each of these functions, when they run, is going to turn off all the other panels and open just the one that we want. So let's test that in action. So I'm going to go back to Unity, and we'll create some buttons to open these different panels, and we'll create the different panels that we want to open. So first things first, before I let's attach this to the UI Manager. I built a UI Manager. Let's attach it. Now I have my main menu panel. It's in my canvas. So I'll tell my script about my main menu panel. But I need to build 2 more panels. Let's create a panel. Let's create a UI panel called instructions. And let's create a UI panel called perhaps story. And that'll be like the lore of my game. Now each of these should have a main menu button. So I'm going to create a button. So UI button. I'm going to call this main. And we'll just say text main. And we're going to set these buttons up so that when we click on this button, it takes us to the main menu. It activates the main menu. So in my button code, in the inspector, when I click on my button, I have an on-click section. These are the functions. These are the actions that my button is going to do when I click on it. I'm going to add a new action to this main menu button. I'm going to tell it that the action is going to be from, whoa, this is a mess. I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to drag in my UI Manager. This button is going to do an action from the UI Manager. The function it's going to run is going to be, did I save my UI Manager? Yes, I did. These are all public. Yes, they are. I don't know why. Public void, class UI Manager. I don't know why it's not letting me add functions to this button. UI Manager is saved. It has public void. I click on my button. I tell it what script to run functions from. Maybe I should give it a reference to the in-game UI Manager instead of the unloaded. There we go. Okay, so I had to drag it in from the hierarchy, which makes sense. This script is technically not loaded in my game. This is the one that's actually running. This exists in my game, is this UI Manager. So I will tell my button about the UI Manager that exists in my game. And then when I click on my button, I will run a function in UI Manager, and I will run the open main. So when I click on this main menu button, it's going to run open main. I'm going to click on this button. I'm going to make a copy of it, and I'll just paste it into my instructions as well. So now I have an instructions and a story page that have main menu buttons. And on my main menu, I'll add 2 more buttons. I'll rename this button Start. On my main menu, I'm just going to deactivate these for now. Deactivate, deactivate. On my main menu, I have my Start Game button. I'm going to add 2 more buttons. I'm going to go to UI, and I'm going to add a button for I will add a button for the instructions panel. And in that instructions button, I will give it, first of all, I'm going to move it away from the other one. And I'm going to rename it in the Text Mesh Pro. I'm going to name it Instructions. And secondly, I'm going to give it a on click. And I'm going to tell it that when I click on it, it should ask the UI manager to run the instructions function. Open instructions function. We're going to do one more of these buttons. I'm just going to start by copying this one and pasting it in. We're going to rename it to let's do a story page. So I'll have like some lore for our game. And I'll write story here. And we're going to give this button the function for open story. Now when I press play, I have this main menu. We already clicked the start game. We know that that's going to open my game up. And my UI manager was never told what panels to open up. So that is going to cause an error. So we need to do instructions, needs to be referenced in my UI manager, and story needs to be referenced in my UI manager. And now that these are not these variables are set, so these variables were not set, so my UI manager was not working. Now that these variables are set, hopefully things should work. So I have a start game. I'm missing buttons. I added some buttons to this main menu. Where are they? Why are they not active? Why is it that when I clicked instructions, nothing activated? I think I set the references wrong. I think I set references to the buttons instead of to the actual panels. I think that that's what I did. I think I dragged in these two buttons here instead of the two panels that the buttons are supposed to reference. So I dragged in the panels correctly, and now I click instructions, and it loads this instruction page. I click main menu, I click story, it loads the story page. Okay. So that's pretty much it. Now we could add details to these panels. I'm going to temporarily disable my main menu. I'll go to my story panel, and maybe I add... Maybe in my story panel I add a UI, Text Mesh Pro, and maybe I say, you know, my story takes place in a grim, dark future where blocks hunt orb people to extinction. You know, I could add story, I could add a UI element, I could add text, I could say, you know, my game's impact statement is a message on the dangers of war and how we should all work to stop war. And then on my instructions page, I could do kind of the same thing. Maybe I go to my instructions page and I give it some text. So instructions, I could give it some UI text, and maybe I say UI text, and maybe I say use WASD to move and a space bar to jump. And maybe I could add some images, I could add sound effects to these buttons, whatever else it is. But now when I press play, and you guys should make these much nicer than I made them. I made this video in 20 minutes. We have a 60-minute class. I expect to spend 40 minutes with us in class doing this. It might take a little longer, it might take a little shorter. But I have my instructions page. I can go back to the main menu. I don't know if this is crashing or if it's not responding. Main, UI Manager, open main. Is that running or is it crashing? press play. I go to story. It opens my story. I go to main. Oh, it's behind the text. I see. I think I put my I put my text in front of my button, so I can't click on my button because there's text in front of it. Same thing here. I put text in front of my button, so I can't click on it. That's a good error to see though. My text box was in front of my button, so I couldn't click on my button. Okay, but that's the goal. You guys can make these much prettier. You guys can clean these up. And that's about it. I'm going to post this with the instructions on Schoology. And yeah, good luck. And if you have any questions, email me. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.